Good morning. This is Lady Danny from Landed Gentry's Handcrafted Herbals, coming to you live from the Roborough of South Philadelphia. You're joining me live. Thank you. A big glut of basil this year, and because of the strange weather we've had on the East Coast, you can see it is flowering at the top. But one of the things that I noticed was because of the strange weather, we've had an extended season. We had temperatures that went close to freezing and then bounced back up. Today it's going to be over 50. So I've got tons and tons of basil. I had red basil in the back, the Siam basil in the back, and I had just regular garden variety basil in the front. I'm left with a lot of this, and I don't want to just throw it out, and in case the temperatures do drop again, which is going to happen at the week, I want to preserve it as much as possible. I wanted to give you just a quick 101 on basic drying herbs. Now, the first thing to do is when you are harvesting herbs that you've grown, please make sure that you're getting them at a time when it hasn't been like raining that morning. You basically want the sun to have come up. You want them to be as dry as possible so that you're not bringing any extra moisture into the game. So there are several ways of doing this. I'm going to show you one of the first ways. Now, this applies not only to basil, but also, well, let me back up here. You can hang herbs, which I see a lot of people doing, and that's fine, but there are some codicils that you need to know about it. One is when you are dealing with fresh herbs, it really is best to let them sit for a bit just to make sure there's no moisture on them. So if you put them on paper toweling, that's fine. You just really want the moisture to get out as much as possible. Some people let them sit overnight just to make sure not only are they not moist, but there are no bugs involved, and you can do that. Basically what you want to do is if you have a bunch like this, and this is just for show because I do have much thicker bunches, but some of them are already tied up and hanging, so it'd be difficult for me to get them. You want to make sure that you tie them in a bundle. You don't want to do too much at a time because you want airflow to go through them. And basically what you want them to do is hang them on some kind of string where they will just hang and dry. The problem is I see a lot of people just stop here. And that can be a little problematic for two reasons. One is a lot of people dry them and they hang them up and they think they smell really fragrant and then they don't do anything about them. Well, realistically, you're only going to do this for about 2 weeks or until the leaves get crunchy, so then you can strip them down and put them in an air locked container so that you make sure they stay dry and then you use them as you need them. So if you let them sit here like this for weeks and weeks and weeks and forget about them, then not only are they going to lose their potency, but they're also going to get all the other junk that's flying around your house and dust and things like that. So that's not a really good idea. What I prefer, especially if you want the air to circulate them around them effectively, is take a paper bag and take a hole punch so that you can put some holes through it. So you would then put your plant material in the bag and then tie around here. So not only are you still getting the airflow, but then any of your leaves as they dry fall into the bag. So it's a lot easier later on when you want to transfer them into an airtight jar that everything is right there. You need to be particularly careful when you are dealing with high moisture plants like basil, like oregano, tarragon, lemon balm, and mint. Unlike your dill, which has low moisture in it, or thyme, okay, those you can hang and you don't need to so much worry about them because they will dry up very quickly. They have small leaves, everything dries quickly, and you're done. But because things like basil have so much moisture in it, it really is important that you get proper air circulation around the leaves, that you're looking at it, that you keep it in a room that's not getting a lot of direct sunlight, but a warm enough temperature it's going to dry everything. Otherwise, you will end up with a bunch of mold, and that's not what you want. Usually, if you're hanging your herbs, in about 2 to 4 weeks, everything should be dry enough, and at that point, you need to make sure that you process them and take the leaves off and put them in a jar so that you can use them. Dried leaves, obviously, they're going to stay longer than fresh, but you're going to try and use them within, I would say, about 6 months. The other thing with them is please remember when you're using the dried ones, they are more concentrated. So you're going to need about a quarter of the amount that you would need in fresh leaves. So just keep that in mind when you're using it. Now, like I said, for high moisture ones like basil, oregano, tarragon, lemon balm, and mint, one of the other ways you might try, which is a bit faster, is the microwave method. And I have done this myself a number of times. And I'm just going to show you what you're going to do with this. We'll pull down the camera. So basically, if you are drying the leaves and you want to use the microwave method, you need to make sure that you are removing the leaves. You don't want the stems in here. You just want to take the leaves off, and you want to give them some space. You don't want to bunch them up. You need a single layer of these. These I've washed earlier and dried, so they're really thoroughly dried. There is no moisture on them, but you really want to try and get the best. I'll take that one out because that's a little brown. You really want to get the best leaves that you can, and then you put them down on a plate, microwave safe plate, with a piece of paper toweling, and then cover them again with a piece of paper toweling. And you're going to want to do these in short bursts. And when I say short bursts, I mean 30 seconds or less. And you're going to want to constantly come back and check on them because you don't want them to scorch and turn brown. If you've managed to do this successfully, here's one I've made earlier. This is what they will come out to. They are nice and crisp. This took me about a minute and a half. I did kind of like 10 to 20 second bursts, and then I kept checking. But then you can see they get nice and crisp and dry, and now I'll be able to transfer them. I'll be able to transfer them in an airtight container and still take advantage of the flavor of my own homegrown basil in my recipes, especially when I'm doing anything from pizza to gravy for a pasta. So that is it. Even though aesthetically, I know there's nothing more charming than having the fresh, herbs hanging about. Realistically, in order to make sure that it dries quickly, you don't have to worry about the mold issue, microwave is kind of a good thing to go. However, I will say there are a couple of things that work really well. I have 2 different varieties of lavender that I grow. This one is Hittacoat, and I forget this one's name. But if you're going to grab these will lend themselves really well to drying by hanging. So that's not a problem. Again, you just make sure that there's enough airflow to get through when you're doing the bundles. I hate when I see people that overdo the bundles and they are so that might be how you buy them in certain places in France after the lavender has dried, but really for successful drying you do need airflow to get through. So just remember that. You don't want them so crowded that they can't get any air whatsoever. But when these are done, and you can certainly do these in the microwave method as well, and you dry them, please remember that if you're going to dry them in the microwave, even with the lavender or rosemary, if you're going to dry them hanging up, leave them on the stem. If you're going to dry them in the microwave, please take them off the stem. However, you can let the stems get dry thoroughly. And then if you have an outdoor chimenea thing, or if you've got a fireplace in the home, these are great for adding just really nice burst of fragrance when you're stuck in the house and you've got a fire roaring. So don't throw out the stems after you take your lavender off of them. Just remember that. It makes a great little addition and you can keep them. And then if you know people that have fireplaces and they're looking for a little kindling, but save these. And then you can always just do something that burns well, like a raffia ribbon. You can tie them around in bundles and make little kindling bundles for your friends that have fireplaces, or just to have around the holidays just because it looks attractive, and then you can just pop it in the fire, or the same thing with the chimenea, and it gives just a lovely burst of that lavender fragrance without being over the top. And also, like I said, just make sure it's raffia or something natural that burns lovely and doesn't put any kind of toxins in the air that you're around. But that is pretty much it. That is drying herbs 101. High moisture ones that you have to worry about are basil, oregano, tarragon, lemon balm, and mint. Generally, any herb that has a larger leaf, those are the ones that generally have a higher moisture content that you have to worry about. And even if you do just like the look and everything of lavender and you just want to hang these up to dry, please remember that everything has a shelf life, and if you're leaving them there, if you want to dry lavender for tea, for example, you want to let it sit up for 2 weeks to 4 weeks so it dries, and then use it in tea, that's one thing. But if you're using it to just scent a room and then you're just going to hang it and never take it down, then please don't go back 6 months later and think, oh, I can use this herb in something else. You don't want to do it that way. You don't want to have something that you're using in any kind of culinary pursuit, or even any kind of bath and body work that's been sitting around for 6 months, picking up dust and everything else that's been flying around in the air. So remember, if you are not going to use a paper bag, although I really recommend just for collection purposes and to keep everything from falling on your floor, because trust me, I've done it with enough things that I've just hung up and not put a paper bag around, and then as they do start to dry, I did it with Joe Pye weed earlier. I was trying to dry some to use for medicinal things, and I forgot to put a bag around it, because when all the little farkles go everywhere and you have to clean them up. Yeah, and you know what, and it doesn't, if you want to make them look pretty while they're hanging, instead of using a brown bag, use the white bags. And instead of using just a circular hole punch, use one that's got a cute little design. I have hole punches that have things that make it look like ribbons or hearts or things like that. And use that as a way to dry it, because you'll still get the scent through the holes, you'll still get enough air in it so that everything dries, and then you'll have a more aesthetic way to hang these things and still be able to use them when they're done. So that is it for today. I'm going to show you the quick, cheat way, because I don't have a whole heck of a lot of time in my life anymore. And that being the case, I really am not one of these people that's going to tell you, oh, let's collect the basil and then let's blanch it and then let's sit around and dry it, and then, you know, it's far too much. So I got a quick and dirty method that works every time. It may not be quite as bright green once you freeze it as it is if you blanch it and all first, but it does work equally as well. And if you're using basil for mostly things like soups and stews and things like that, and you just want to have that really fresh burst of flavor. Plus, I have seen they do basil in a tube now, just like they do tomato paste and lemongrass and all these things. They are charging extortionate amounts for that. You can just make it up and pop it in. Pop it into the freezer and then pop it out when you need it. And that's like a much better and much more cost-effective way, especially if you've already grown this stuff and you've got it sitting around. And if not, and you're buying basil, this will still be a quick and dirty way for you to like take it, use it fresh when you're doing a salad or whatever for dinner, and then how you'll be able to save some of it to use later on when it's like snow on the ground, you don't feel like going out, and you want something to add a little burst of flavor to dinner. So that's it. Thanks very much. Remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, just try and be better people. I hope to see you on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I will not be here on Friday because it'll be Black Friday. Not that I'm shopping or anything, but it is one of the few days my husband and I both have off. So I'm trying to convince him to help me get the third floor in order, because we've just been told we're having house guests in March. And believe me, if you saw what my third floor looks like right now, which is like everything stripped bare to the wall, it needs some work. So pray for me on that one. In the meantime, I will see you. We'll discuss how to do your quick and dirty thing for basil. I'll give you a heads up too. It also works for mint. So for those of you that drink mojitos year round, it's a great way to save mint as well. So have a great one.